Throughout the Western world, there are many dishonest narratives that are being spun. The political class that are puppets to the multinational corporations and the corporate media they own, as well as the banking cartels that fund their campaigns, spout that endless numbers of migrants from incompatible cultures are needed indefinitely, and it's all for the good of the people of the West. Leaders from both sides of the political spectrum have now for decades told the citizens of the West that open borders are needed in order to safeguard the welfare state as well as help grow GDP. With never having asked nor received permission, almost without exception, every country in the Western world is being flooded with immigration that is having not only a dramatic demographic effect, but is transforming the targeted societies. Many Westerners regurgitate the propaganda and celebrate the vibrant diversity and enrichment that African and Middle Eastern immigration brings. People are told that their countries will not survive without replacing the current majority people and their culture. This script is cloned and rebranded for every nation in the West with the same results. Those that do not celebrate at the altar of multiculturalism are branded heretics, and in the more deluded countries, such as Sweden or Canada, for example, open opposition to your own displacement and disenfranchisement can have serious consequences, especially but not limited to economic. Make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it, and eventually they will believe it. We need mass immigration to help offset the economic losses that a declining population will eventually bring. To this end, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte secretly agreed to foist hundreds of thousands of refugees from Turkey each year as part of an EU-Turkey deal, but did not inform other EU leaders and, of course, not their people, already struggling under the dysfunction that has been recently imported by Merkel and the EU. She now intends on bringing in, and this is only the Syrian contingent to the migration flood, she intends to fly 250,000 Syrians into Germany per year. That will inevitably further Merkel the continent. And this is just the Anatolian route for migrants to find their way into the welfare states of Northern Europe. The two European leaders met with the then Turkish Prime Minister to discuss the details of the EU-Turkey refugee deal in private the night before the EU-Turkey summit in March 2016. The details of the secret trilateral meeting where the deal was struck has been revealed in a new book, Driven by Events, Merkel's Refugee Policy, by Robin Alexander, a journalist with Die Welt. Speaking in Geneva recently, the Greek bureaucrat, the Commissioner for Migration, Dimitris Avramopoulos, denied terror attacks are linked to migration and warned the biggest threat to Europe is the rise of populism, nationalism, and xenophobia. To combat populism and nationalism, the EU has declared that it needs 6 million additional migrants from Africa. To facilitate this massive movement of people from Africa, the European Union is to open asylum processing centers in West Africa and countries on the southern shore of the Mediterranean. And they will join the millions that have already arrived to the countries of Northern Europe and will statistically live out their lives on state handouts. And while those handouts, such as free apartments, are not good enough for many of those arriving, there is a very clear pattern here to be gleaned. The fact that 75% of those arrivals are young men, and this is not, as some have said, the demographics of a civilian population displaced by war, but the demographics of an army. And this army of young men is virtually unemployable. Of the millions of migrants that have entered Europe, in the case of Germany, who has taken on the lion's share, and with assurances from Chancellor Merkel that those arriving were highly educated, only 54 people 54 have gotten a job that requires skills. In fact, the majority of migrants arriving are illiterate, even in their own language. Moreover, and this is a very uncomfortable fact for everyone but needs to be said nonetheless, is that the countries in West Africa where the asylum centers are being set up to import new Germans and new Swedes have on average some of the lowest IQ populations on Earth. That's not to say that there aren't intelligent people in these areas, but as an aggregate, these areas that have not only spawned some of the most dysfunctional human societies on Earth, but are coincidentally home to people with the lowest IQ, on average, to be found anywhere. And unfortunately, and I'm not going to get into the reasons why, as there are many, and it is not only due to IQ, but consistently, wherever an African as well as a Middle Eastern diaspora exists in the West, there is chronic and persistent problems of many kinds, but especially unemployment. This pattern is replicated in every country that keeps statistics, in the UK, France, Sweden, everywhere. And none of this speaks to the loss of social capital as well as cohesion currently being inflicted on the countries of the West by mass immigration. And this is all coming at a time when experts warn that millions of jobs will be eliminated via automation, artificial intelligence, and robots in the coming years. But none of this matters to the political class that is firmly in the pocket of multinationals and the global banking cartels and their controlled media. The political class will continue to import people that, as the vast accumulated experience has shown, will become a net drain on the country and the economy, and then disingenuously hail them as the saviors of the welfare state. War is peace, freedom is slavery, diversity is our greatest strength. However, as I have argued in a previous video that is focused on Japan, the world is changing and so too must our understanding of it. That's why facts, rather than emotion and sentimentality, must be at the forefront of decisions that are being made that will permanently alter an entire civilization, and not necessarily for the better. That's why new research, such as that coming from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology that takes on the big lie and turns it on its head, must be shouted from the rooftops. The central thesis of this research is that there is no evidence of a negative relationship between aging and GDP per capita. In the paper entitled Secular Stagnation, the Effect of Aging on Economic Growth in the Age of Automation continues. On the contrary, the relationship is significantly positive in many specifications. The research shows that since the early 1990s or 2000s, the periods commonly viewed as the beginning of the adverse effects of aging in much of the advanced world, there is no negative association between aging and lower GDP per capita. In fact, the increasing scarcity of labor due to aging might actually be spurring the increased adoption of labor-saving technology. A shortage of younger and middle-aged workers can trigger so much more adoption of new automation technologies that the negative effects of labor scarcity could be completely neutralized or even reversed. We know by extensive research that the people that Europe is importing come from low IQ areas of the world, and most have little in the way of education. And they will, as previous waves before them, have difficulty integrating and keeping a job. We now have economic studies from one of the top universities in the world saying there is no link to a nation's GDP and a falling birth rate. Let me say that again. There is no link between a falling birth rate, aging society, and a lower GDP per capita. There is no need to further import people who statistically for generations will be a burden on the state and will further strain what is left of community cohesion in the targeted countries. The big lie is just that. It's a lie. That mass immigration will save the economy and the welfare state. I have explained why this is in a previous video, and you can find it here. But again, none of this matters. The EU, despite everything, is now setting up asylum processing centers in Africa. They will continue to import wholesale, mostly illiterate, low IQ migrants that will live their lives on the dole, and they will foist them upon the populations of Europe without consultation nor consent in order to battle, as they put it, populism and nationalism. Secret deals to import hundreds of thousands and open plans to bring in millions more migrants will be like adding gasoline to the ire that is the populist and nationalist cause, and shows just how out of touch from reality the political class now is. It's almost as if they're trying to create a Fourth Reich, pushing the peoples of entire countries into a corner and browbeating them with leftist demagoguery. These moves will only push the fence-sitters as well as many of the progressive left into the arms of the right. The political class believe that the wheels of history have come to a halt, but when people no longer see a future for their children, they will see how wrong they were, and in the end, they will be made to understand.